I was in a long checkout line recently at Trader Joe's. I'd been there for about 3 minutes, and we weren't moving nearly as fast as I thought we should. But good news, I see a staff member walking over to one of the registers, and I thought, all right, here we go. We're going to get moving. But what she did next shocked me. She said, out loud for everyone to hear, "I'm open on register 4. What do you think happened then? The people who'd been there about 3 seconds beelined it from the back of the line straight up there, and there I stood after all of my valorous waiting in the same line that I was in the first place, no closer to the checkout. Now everybody knows you don't say I'm open on register 4. You say, may I have the next customer in line? Right? That's how you run a checkout. Well, that's how I feel anyway. But I think that this is one of those times that we get to hear the self-talk in our head. I deserve to go ahead of those people. Have you ever been in a restaurant and not realized that you were noticing who came in when and who got seated in what order? And you didn't realize that you noticed that until the server went over to the table that clearly got seated after you first. You know that feeling where you say, excuse me, sir, ma'am, I believe we were seated first? And of course, what we're saying to ourselves is, I deserve to eat ahead of those people. I came in here first after all. It reminds us that life is so often unfair. And that is part of coping with what it means to live on earth, that there's so many things, little things and big things, that are unfair. But now we hear in the gospel that heaven isn't fair either. So God starts us off today with saying, expect to not understand this story. Expect that it's going to feel like a puzzle. Expect that. And the reason we can expect it is, God says, my ways are not your ways. This is going to sound foreign to you. You're busy figuring out who goes next in the checkout line and who should have their order taken. That's your level of wisdom. What I'm doing, it's a whole different level. As high as heaven is above earth, that's how much above the level you're thinking I'm thinking right now. So we're told that if we want to understand, if we want to glimpse what thinking that way could be like, we have to get to know this landowner. It's not the story as a whole that reveals what the kingdom of God is like, Jesus says. It's the landowner himself. And what we learn about heaven from the landowner is that he settles every agreement, every payment on a case-by-case basis. We would love for there to be a manual that made it easy for us to know what would happen in every circumstance. But the landowner refuses to submit to a system like that. The landowner handles every situation on a case-by-case basis and says to the workers and to us, you can trust me, I'll give you what is just. And we think, okay, what's just? I know what that means. But then, oh, no. Not your justice, God says. My justice. Heavenly justice. It's going to be different than what you're expecting. What we hear in the gospel today is that God isn't fair. God's better than fair. God is generous. God's not fair. God is generous. If you think about what generosity is by definition, it breaks the bounds of fairness. It goes above and beyond what's called for. God's not fair. God is generous. Now, in our way of looking at fair, we can figure out who deserves what, who gets served in what order. And I think all of us have had that experience of knowing what someone else's salary is and feeling like, how could they be paid that if I work this job long? How could that be? I don't know how many of you are outraged to know that I get paid the same as a priest with one parish. Doesn't that just make you want to just run with a pitchfork to the diocese? But no, there are so many cases of our sense of fairness being violated. If you live long enough, you know stories like this. I've been out of college now for 20 years. Do you know that among my college friends, one of them, who's watching today, has been happily married for 19 years and has a beautiful family? Another one, who also was in our college, has had 3 miscarriages and has been diagnosed with MS. Another friend married a college sweetheart, somebody that we all knew and loved, who cheated on her and broke her heart. They didn't deserve that. This is not about deserving. And maybe that's what this gospel wants to introduce us to. For Christians, the word deserve is kind of a dirty word. I mean, if you think about what we believe about what Christ has done for us, if you think about what we believe Good Friday means, if you really think about that, if you ever have worn or are wearing a crucifix and say, I deserve to be next in line, I deserve to be served first, can you see how crass that would sound? When we have been treated with such love and mercy, when our freedom has been purchased for us at so great a price. I have a friend who has a plaque in her kitchen that explains this just as clearly as I've ever heard. On the plaque, it says this: grace is when God gives us what we don't deserve. And mercy is when God doesn't give us what we do deserve. That's worth another listen, isn't it? Grace is when God gives us what we don't deserve. Mercy's when God holds back from giving us what we do deserve. So I think that introduces us to a way of thinking that can free us from a lot of this unhappiness of thinking we have to figure out what's fair. If we look at a crucifix, we have a very clear sense that our freedom was bought at a very high price. And God changed the rules of accounting for us. And so why, in order to be next in the grocery line, would we trade all that for that old school accounting system? I mean, after all, if I walked out of Trader Joe's and got hit by a bus, am I 100% sure that all of my accounts are in the black? If I go by the old school way of accounting, is that really what I want? Is there not a much more beautiful way that has been revealed to us of grace and mercy? So this week, I think all of us are given some really important homework to take a good hard look at how we use the word deserve in our lives. How much does deserve show up in our speaking? How much does it show up in our thinking? I deserve this. When we say it or when we think it, what's at stake? What are we referring to? Do our kids say it? What are they referring to? Where's that coming from? Maybe this week would be a good time to just take a couple of moments, maybe a minute, to just gaze at a crucifix and think about the word deserve and see if we could maybe deprogram a little bit of that from ourselves. I mean, when my life and my freedom have been purchased at so high a cost, am I really going to fuss over who's in line ahead of me at Marshall's? Doesn't it seem crass and beneath us to think that way? Might I be willing to make this something I could work on? You know what's going to happen in 6 months? Lent is coming back. It's always coming around again, isn't it? If we do a little of work on this now, can you envision maybe being able to pick something to do for Lent, such as I'm going to go 40 days and nights without the word deserve? We won't be able to do that cold turkey probably. We have to prepare ourselves now. I had a funny memory recently of being a kid and remembering that whenever we were on the thruway, whenever our family was driving anywhere on the thruway, I always thought that everybody else going our direction was going to the same place. And I would always say, Dad, step on it. They're going to beat us. And I think Jesus could hear that story and say, that is a cute story. And now it's time to put that aside and grow up. Because life is not a big competition. The landowner deals with us all on a case-by-case basis. And every day we are one step closer to the fullness of that kingdom. It's time for us to get to know the landowner.